Welcome back to everyone. With me today is Siavash Khaksar and Hannes Herrmann, of course. And I'd like to get you two gentlemen to talk to me about the union, because you're both involved at a local level at some significant extent, to which I'm usually not. So can you, Siavash, can you explain what you do for the union at the moment?
Sure. So my current role is I'm the local area delegate, which means I have some responsibilities for people in my electorate, which in this instance contains the school and some of the related research centers to the school. And it mainly means I can be the point of contact between staff and the union. You know, if they have any questions about their employment, if there are any issues, or basically I can be that buffer of providing that information to the union, finding them the right support depending on what problems they may have, and additionally it's I can also be a support person when people are going to a meeting, and provide some advice based to the best of my ability, and sometimes that advice might be simply as let's go and have a chat with the union to see what resources are available to you, and so on and so forth.
So very much interacting with the broader staff base
Exactly,
and union membership, I guess. So,
Yeah.
Hannes, what are you up to?
Well, I used to be a delegate. I'm not anymore.
Yeah.
I'm now on the Curtin Committee of the Union. So that's more about the strategy and planning and communicating about what's happening in the university with the union and back and forth, and I guess making decisions at some level.
Yeah.
So I do try to help out with some things if I can, but most of the actual work of the union is done by delegates.
Right. So you're in the hierarchy, but not on a day-to-day basis talking to
Correct.
stuff.
Yes,
Yeah.
I can advise people if necessary or whatever, but the gung-ho people who are front lines and who are main face with the people is our delegates, and that's where you've probably gotten a whole bunch of emails from Siavash, and very few from me.
Yeah. Maybe one thing I'll add to that, if you don't mind, is union themselves, they have employees that are employed by the union, and an interesting thing that happens is the delegates end up being the people who bring up the issues, and because they're also they would potentially be there in lots of meetings with management, whether they're support people or someone who's summarizing information from the broader community and bringing that to the attention of management. There are some protections provided to us legally, so from a federal government point of view, but at the end of the day, the delegates aren't necessarily there to just cause trouble or be at the front line of every fight. We're there as support, and we're there to basically understand if there are issues, identify them, and find the best path forward, and finding what support already exists at the university level, what the employer rights are, and helping people find that right place to go to.
Yeah, I guess it's worth noting that it's not all about just fight, although
Exactly.
that can be important at some level, but it's about outcomes. Yeah.
We have previously had a school leadership that was very in tune with the unions, and at that point it was a very cooperative picture. Where things diverge more, then there can be more friction, shall we say.
Yeah, so something that we have to watch out for. So right at the moment, we're engaged in the process of trying to formulate a new EBA. I believe one or both of you might have something to say about that.
So maybe I can start, and please feel free to jump in. EBA, or Enterprise Bargaining Agreement, these are legally binding documents between employee and employers, and they are also overseen by the Fair Work Commission here in Australia. And I think in essence, it provides a series of guidelines that are legally bound about our day-to-day activities. It has things about workload. It has things about how professional staff work is calculated, what rights do they have, for example, things like flexible work arrangements, how leave works, how much leave do you get. For academic staff, things like how much of your time can be spent on research and teaching depending on your contract. How do the fixed term contract employees fall into things, and it provides a lot of guidelines for basically you understanding what are the things that you have to do, what are the things that are if you're doing them, maybe they're not necessarily something you have to do. So it's very clear and it's very detailed, and our university has one of the more strong EBAs, which I'm very proud of, and as you mentioned, we are in the current round of negotiations for the next version. But Hannes, if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, the EBA is really important, and while we think the EBA is fairly clear, the university doesn't necessarily agree with us. There have been several cases where the university hasn't necessarily agreed with what would normally be considered a commonplace agreement of, such as the interpretation of so-and-so must do something has been interpreted as so-and-so must have a process for thinking about getting that done effectively.
It's an interesting perspective, yes.
There's also a case over East that's just finished up where a university decided, for example, that sessional staff who are lecturers, having consultation hours was part of the lecturing duties and therefore didn't need to pay separately. Whereas the EBA clearly said what things were assigned to, and therefore they were able to take it to Fair Work, show that the EBA didn't align with what the university is doing, and the court agreed with them, which is a good thing really. Well, the tribunal, not the court. But,
I feel like, to be honest, as a personal comment, I feel like the union is quite fundamental to the way the university works, and without it wouldn't. Things would break.
Well, things break anyway.
Yeah, they do.
And the union tends not to get involved until things are very broken, because in general we prefer not to fight.
Yeah.
And often, of course, when things break involving non-union members, the union can't really step in. We do have limited resources because we have a limited number of members. The more members we have, the more resources we have. But in general, if somebody is having problems, we would prefer to try to support a member than a non-member. So that is one problem where people come to the union and say, hey, look, I need help. And it's like, yeah, I'm sorry, but these people have been paying their dues for years, and we're going to prioritise supporting them. But legal stuff is really expensive.
It is. There are cases where, although it's a non-union member who's brought something to the union's attention, it's nonetheless a systemic problem that the union would feel like it needs to get involved in.
Well, I would say there are things, there are some issues that happen that have broader implications. For example, it's usually disputes regarding contracts and the way a particular fixed-term contract has been arranged. Whether and especially when we're going through contract renewals. But as Hannes mentioned, at the end of the day, the resources are limited, and especially the lawyers that they can provide if things get to, say, the commission, or they go to hearing or arbitration, those resources would have to be given to people who are members. But we're always happy to have that initial discussion and provide some general advice to them. And one thing, I guess, that's interesting, Hannes mentioned this, it's not always the case that, the union is just looking for something to go wrong and start fighting about it. Actually, a lot of our training is about understanding when someone comes to us as delegate or as a union support person, to see, well, is this actually a bigger problem, or is it a disagreement at the workplace? And if it's a disagreement at the workplace, our initial advice is always going to be, let's help you solve this locally. Let's help you solve this disagreement. And and interesting that happens, when people talk it out to you, and you start to explain and you start to identify, well, was it a disagreement? Because especially on the academic side, our jobs can be complex.
It's the whole university is like a petri dish for disagreement.
Exactly,
Really,
and we'll have disagreements, and I think the interesting thing is, because we're at a university, lots of disagreements end up being, we're all passionate about supporting students.
Yeah.
And it usually comes down to supporting students and how we teach, or a certain assessment, or the amount of time we're spending with the students. So it's just, people would have different opinions, and that's okay. I think that's what universities are supposed to be. We're supposed to be a little bit argumentative with each other, to challenge each other, and just finding ways to see each other's perspective. That has been, in my experience in the past, I would say 2 years. There are sometimes real issues, and there's sometimes, well, it's an instance of, let's have a discussion, let's see what really happened, and help you solve it. And thankfully, I would say we have managed to solve a lot of things at the local level. But of course, just like any place, there could be some bigger issues that would take a longer time, and I think the more members a union has, of course, they will have a little bit more leverage in making real change and real impact.
And of course, as part of being part of a university, a lot of what we think about is educative. So sometimes the disagreements are based on one of the two parties not actually knowing what their rights is, which is where us being able to, say, hey, look, this is the part of the EBA, and sometimes like a manager hasn't been doing something just because they didn't know. So normally, if you can approach them and talk with them politely, you might be able to get somewhere better than just by shouting.
Yes, otherwise it'll become much more difficult overall, I guess.
Correct, yes.
I wanted to pick up on, you mentioned, of course, we're all here for the students, basically.
Sure.
The students are represented directly by the guild and not by the NTEU, but what's your feeling about what the union might be doing indirectly, I guess, for students in a broad sense?
Well, the union and the guild actually have a very close relationship with each other, because especially when there are systematic issues with academics for teaching the units, and if people are stressed, or they have a big issue in many universities, workload and how that's managed. If academics are stressed, that's something that will immediately affect the quality of their teaching, the amount of time they have for students. So in my experience, Guild has worked very closely with the union. They've been very understanding. As an example, in this recent round of negotiations, when we've held some events, some gatherings to share the information, Guild has been there to provide support for us, and I think that's the beauty of the relationship, teacher-student relationship that's been built there. And if we get the resources that we need as people who are just talking about the academic perspective, of course, then we would have more time to spend on teaching and doing what we are here to do. And the same for the professional staff who are supporting our work, and whether, as an example, one of the biggest professional roles that we have are the teaching support officers. And the amount of admin job they have to do, lots of paperwork, and in a lot of cases, a lot of it, I remember when I first came in, I had to sit in with our teaching support officers to explain to me how some of these systems work. And when things are correct, the learning management systems are organized, the lectures are provided in time, the assignments, we have time to design more creative assignments. So I think it works best in everyone's interest in the end.
It all kind of flows through to the outcomes. That's it's important, I think.
It is a clear recognition that most staff are here because we want the students to prosper, which means we want to help the student guild. And the student guild realizes that when the staff are looked after, as Siavash was saying, then it is better for the students in the long run. So in general, the relationship is really quite good. And in fact, there are some cases where we do work fairly closely together, because management doesn't necessarily like listening to the union that much. On
It's
the other
like for
hand,
them it's probably a bit like going to the dentist, I guess, isn't it?
yeah, something like that. I don't want to comment further on that. But the point is that the university does listen to the student guild fairly closely. So if we have something that affects the students, it sometimes is more profitable for us to discuss the matter with the student guild, see if they are on board, and sometimes even have them raise it rather than us raise it. Or sometimes they'll come to talk to us about things, you know. So it is really a spirit of cooperation. It's not like we're colluding or anything.
It's more minds sort of acting in good faith, trying to tackle the same problems.
Absolutely, yes. And we are all working towards the same goal, as upper management presumably is as well, to look after the students, right? That's repeatedly what they say their primary goal is.
Yep.
And I think that's one of the things that really attracted me to pursue this career in academic life is just everyone, most people, I would say 99% of people working, they really, really care about the students. I think sometimes, in the frustration of a assignment being difficult, or people, some students might see people at university as people who are against them, or there's there could be some friction, but in the internal discussions, I can say 99% of the time, even when there are disagreements, and when you listen into those meetings, you see just how much passion everyone has on making sure the students get the experience, the students learn what they need to learn, and they're prepared when they graduate. I think the best example of that was during COVID. The amount of discussions we had with each other about, well, look, we want to make sure they're supported. Well, let's say we're doing online lectures, and we'll have a scenario where people will have their kids around. So let's see how we can adapt to that, because that's a new thing.
We just have to make it work.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think it's just that passion. Maybe it's something that may be a bit hidden. It may get lost in the challenges of a lecture room, but I think that's one of the best things at university. You see just people who really, really care. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. I might wrap it up there. Thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you.
And thanks to our listeners again for taking the time to grab your insights for themselves. So thank you.
Very much.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you for the invite.